Namaste, everyone. Good to see you. Good to be here. And thank you, Kapiel, for asking me to make this video to share with your KRS audience on birth time rectification, which is a topic that I'm fascinated with. And I'll do the best I can to make this a clear and concise presentation. But if people have interest in going in more depth into this topic, then I'm teaching a weekend webinar this weekend, actually, August 1st and 2nd. You can check it out on my website, lightonvedicastrology.com, and get more details. Any case, so, oh my God, this is such a huge topic. It's huge because so many people have birth time issues, and it's also huge because there aren't resources out there for precisely how do you go through the steps. And so a lot of ambiguity about how do you rectify the birth time? How do you correct a problem? How do you solve a problem? And yeah, this is a topic that I've been fascinated with for 28 years, and I've explored a lot, done hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of birth time rectifications, and the process has gotten simpler and simpler and clearer and clearer, and that's why I've written a book, Birth Time Rectification Simplified using divisional charts and Jyotish methods. So that's what this webinar is based on, and let's dive into this topic. And first of all, just share on a personal note that in the winter of 2008, I had a wake-up call about how serious the birth time issues can be. I had already seen just about every kind of birth time issue that people could possibly see. You know, people with rounded birth times to the hour, let's say 12 noon, suspiciously rounded birth times, or birth times that land the ascendant right on the cusp between two signs, so then that has to be resolved, or two birth times. Mother says one thing, the birth certificate says another. I mean, it goes on, the types of birth time issues that people can have. And so in the winter of 2008, our 12-year-old son, Jai, was about to be born. And so I had this superhero-like determination, like, this is not going to be a problem for my son. No, he's not going to have any birth time issues. This was going to be like the first gift to my son, to give him an exact birth time down to the second, so that he could use all the Jyotish tools throughout his whole life, and consult the chart and get the guidance that Jyotish can give, which is incredible. This is an incredible tool to have, but it's not useful if you don't have the correct birth time. So anyways, this is how I was approaching his birth. And so I had synchronized my watch to the Naval Observatory master clock. So I knew exactly what time it was. And then, I was determined to hover over him, so I knew when his first breath was, which is what we're interested in, the first breath. That's when the birth chart begins. So I was so on it. And he was born at 8:46 p.m. and 12 seconds. And however, the birth certificate says 10:46 rounded. 2 hours later, this would change his ascendant from Virgo to Libra. Totally different reading. So in any case, it was not really a problem. I corrected it, but it was just a clerical error. But how many people are left with inaccurate birth times? Recently I did a reading for a woman whose father was an astrologer, and she knew exactly when she was born. There was no ambiguity at all. He had pinpointed the exact time, just like I did. And it was like, oh my God, how unusual to actually get a birth time that was accurate. You know, I can just like, okay, good. Someone who thinks like I do, you know, and is interested in precision. And really, if you're doing birth time rectification, you've got to be interested in precision. And so it's the problem is that people have rounded birth times. You're just given, it's close enough, 10 o'clock, 10:30, something like that, you know, or somewhere in the afternoon. You know, I've heard it all. And so, and clients can have like this feeling like, yeah, it's close enough, right? It's pretty good, the birth time. It's on the birth certificate. It's got to be right. And I tell them, well, yeah, no, what we know is that somebody recorded your birth time at that time. But doesn't mean your birth time is that time. That's, as I share the story of my son. So rounded birth times are not what Jataka or natal horoscope is about. Jataka, what we're interested in. Tell me about my natal chart and make predictions. This is dependent. This system is dependent on an accurate birth time. This is not true for other branches of Jyotish. Prashna, for instance, uses the time that somebody asks the question. That becomes the birth time for that chart. Or in Muhurta, we select the best birth time for whatever event it is, a marriage or starting a business, and that becomes the birth time, and that creates the chart. We create the chart from that. But in Jataka, we are dependent on whatever someone records, and that becomes a problem if people they're not recording the birth time for astrology purposes, or they're just not very precise for whatever reason. And then, you know, and for all purposes, it doesn't matter. Like, who cares when you're born? But in astrology, it matters. It changes the Vimshatri Dasha calculation to have a different birth time. And it also can change the ascendant in the divisional charts. And if you're going to use the divisional charts, which is certainly recommended, then those need to be corrected. The divisional charts are a predictive tool. They need to be accurate. And Kapiel Raaj says, prediction is a crude affair without correct divisional charts. And we'll look at examples of that coming up here in just a minute. But why the divisional charts are a microscopic look at the natal chart. So you want to know about an event that's happened in the past. You want to be able to see an event that's happened in the past, like say your marriage. Well, it may be difficult to see it entirely with a conclusive certainty from just the natal chart. So we use the divisional charts. These are a confirmation tool. They are provided to give us confidence in a prediction. You can see it in the natal chart, that's great. If you see in the divisional chart, it's better because it's confirmed. Now you have not just one clue, you have at least two. And so it's the more clues we get, the more certain we are. Like, astrology is a game of certainty. So we look for clues wherever we can find them. And so this class that I'm giving in the book that I've written is really about the divisional charts, it's really a crash course in seeing events in the divisional charts, not just the Navamsha, but a range of divisional charts. And so, for instance, if you have an event related to moving, like say you've moved overseas, that definitely should be shown in the D4 chart, the Chaturtamsha. If you've had a child, that definitely should be shown in the Saptamsa, the D7 chart. And it goes through all the divisional charts. All the divisional charts will give us these deeper clues. The D24 specifically for education. I love that. That is, almost everyone's gone to college. So the D24 is also a refined divisional chart. It's only maybe between 2 and 8 minutes for the ascendant boundary. And so that is a great tool for honing the birth time. So correcting the ascendants in the divisional charts is correcting the birth time. And just as Kapiel Raaj says, prediction is a crude affair. I love this quote. Prediction is a crude affair without the correct divisional chart. What does he mean by correct divisional chart? Correct ascendant in the divisional chart. And so let's look at some examples. Okay, let's see in the chart of, I'm going to share my screen. And this is the chart of B.V. Raman. And this is an example that Kapiel Raaj uses in his seminal book, Planets and Children, which came out in 1993, the year that I met him, and when he first came to the United States. So he brought Planets and Children with him. And he makes a statement in reference to B.V. Raman's chart, how it's ludicrous. It's quite an extreme statement. It's ludicrous to predict without looking at divisional charts. And in the specific example he gives is, it's ludicrous to predict childbirth without correct divisional charts, without the subtumpsa specifically. And so he uses the example of B.V. Raman because it's dramatic. He had 9 children, 9. I mean, this is the father of modern Vedic astrology. And we can expect that his birth time is going to be accurate, right? And and therefore the divisional chart should be accurate. So he had these 9 children, mostly in his Jupiter Dasha, Jupiter Mahadasha, in the Vimshotri Dasha system. So if in the upper left-hand corner here, upper left-hand corner is the natal chart. And just below it is the Saptamsa, the divisional chart for childbirth. So Jupiter, so his first child actually was in Rahu Dasha, Rahu moon. And you can see in the natal chart, Rahu is aspected by Jupiter. Jupiter's trinal aspect onto Rahu. Jupiter is the karaka of childbirth. If it's a Jupiter dasha, childbirth can happen. If Jupiter's aspecting a planet and that dasha is running, childbirth can happen. And I say can more than will. I mean, it's a clue, that's all. It's just one clue. We have to look for a lot more than just that. But yeah, it's a possibility. It's in the realm of possibility. When you have 1 or 2 clues, it's possible. So we tentatively move forward. Okay, so this is the first child was born in Rahu, Moon, Mercury. Jupiter aspects Rahu and the Moon. That's good. That's a pretty strong clue. Mercury is the 5th lord from Aquarius. So Rahu, Moon, Mercury, is there a clue in the ascendant? Can you start to see that this is possibly going to happen in it's going to have a child? I would say, yeah, it's certainly a possibility. But now look at the Saptamsa. Rahu is now on the 5th and the 11th house axis. So it's on the axis of childbirth, the axis of the 5th house. That's a strong clue. Furthermore, it's aspected by Jupiter. And not only, and Jupiter from the 5th house. And Jupiter aspects the Moon. So as well. So Jupiter's aspecting both from the 5th house. And okay, so we can certainly say that childbirth could happen and would likely happen. Mercury as the subdasha lord doesn't need to be in a specific house. Subdasha lord, that is, Pratyantar dasha lord, because it's the fifth lord in the natal chart. So wherever it's placed in the septamsa, it can give childbirth, because Mercury is a qualifier for childbirth from the natal chart. Okay, so can people see that? See the possibility and see the confirmation in the D7, the septamsa chart. Okay, so now, second child is born in Jupiter, 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 Moon. So second child, Jupiter, 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 Moon. So again, Jupiter is in the fifth house, and he had 7 of his 9 children in his Jupiter dasha. Now, you look at Jupiter in the natal chart, it has no connection with the fifth house, fifth lord. None. It's not aspecting the fifth house. It's not in the fifth house. It's not even in the ninth house or aspecting the ninth house. The ninth house is relevant too, because using the Bhavam principle, the ninth house is a fifth house from the fifth house. So yes, it can give ninth house also we need to look at. But I mean, we'd be hard pressed really to say that a Jupiter dasha, this is why it's crude. It's not precise. If we're only looking at the natal chart, it's where we get our preliminary clues from. But look at Jupiter's position in the septamsa, and this is the point that Kapiel Raaj makes, that then you can explain why so many children happening in the Jupiter dasha. Okay. So the other thing why he said it's ludicrous, if you think about it. So the ascendant lasts for, in the natal chart, the ascendant lasts for approximately 2 hours, right? So does that mean if you're not looking at the septamsa or any divisional charts, we're only looking at the natal chart, somebody entering a Jupiter dasha, anybody born with Aquarius ascendant on August 8th, 1912, in a Jupiter dasha could have 9 children. 9 children, really? That's the ludicrous part, is that not everybody who was born on that day with Aquarius ascendant and running a Jupiter dasha was going to have 9 children, or some of those people certainly may have had no children. So then how do you explain that? Well, and this is another reason why we look at the divisional charts, because the ascendant in the septamsa lasts for only 14 minutes, 44 seconds, 14 minutes. So it narrows it down to only a population who had Aquarius ascendant and also had Aries ascendant in the septamsa with Jupiter in the 5th house and running a Jupiter dasha. So then we're getting much more precise. And this is why he is making a point that it's ludicrous to make broad predictions only on the natal chart. Now, I know that people are psychic, they are intuitive, they can look at a natal chart and they get flashes of intuition. I'm not referring to that. We're talking, I mean, yogis don't even need the chart. They just can know everything. It just comes to them instantly. We're not talking about that. We're talking about astrology logic, astrologic. We're talking about using these fundamental principles. How can we justify events? Certainly there are astrologers in India hardly even need the natal chart and can predict things amazingly. But we're talking about the average person. What's the average person going to need? These are the tools you need. You need the divisional charts. Okay, so we can go through all of these children in B.V. Raman's life, and we can see reasons why these happened, why these events happened. But let's look at another example, which will be punchy. It will help to make this even clearer. Okay, let's look at Prince Harry's chart. Okay, Prince Harry. So this is the prince, the son of Princess Diana and Prince Charles, and he also had a child. He was married to I forget her name, but in any case, he was married in 2018, and they had their first child last year, May 6, 2019. So this was in Rahu Venus Dasha. So let's just look at Rahu Venus. Rahu, just simply Rahu in the natal chart. Could you make any justification for childbirth happening in Rahu Dasha? Well, you certainly can, because Rahu is aspected by the fifth Lord Mars. So that's a strong clue. Not much more else though that you can say about that. And then looking at the subdasha Lord Venus, likewise, there's no connection with Mars, no connection with Mars being the fifth Lord, no connection with the fifth house, no connection with Jupiter, the Karaka for childbirth. So how do you justify Venus giving? How would you predict that? Well, you could say Venus is in the fifth house from Rahu, and that's fair enough. That's the Dasha Lagna. So that is certainly a clue, and a valid clue. Sun is the subdasha Lord also. Sun is with Mercury. Mercury is the fifth Lord from Rahu. So you can see hints in the natal chart why this is likely to happen or possibly happen. Keep it in the realm of possibility, not a probability. If you want to move it, prediction to a probability, we look at the divisional charts. Okay, so let's look at his Saptamsa. So his Saptamsa, like BV Raman, is also Aries ascendant. And his Saptamsa lasts for about 16 minutes. His birth time is 16:20 or 4:20 p.m. is within 2.5 minutes from the boundary of Aries. So a little bit close, but we can see that this is likely correct because Venus is where? It's in the fifth house. So Rahu is in the ninth house in Jupiter's sign. So in the Saptamsa, we can justify a Rahu Dasha happening for childbirth. It's in the fifth house from the fifth house, the ninth house, and it's disposited by Jupiter, the Karaka. But now Venus is in the fifth house. It's aspected by the fifth Lord. It's aspected by the fifth house Karaka, Jupiter. I mean, what more do you want? I mean, that's it. House Lord Karaka. That's something for an astrologer to salivate about. I mean, that's about as beautiful as it gets. So when you understand that, looking at this. Oh wait, sorry for people using the North Indian. That's what it looks like. Yeah, so Venus in the fifth house in the sign of Leo and aspected by Jupiter, the fifth house Karaka, and Sun, the fifth Lord. Okay, for an astrologer, this is pure beauty. This is a strong, strong confirmation. So I'm showing you a couple of examples of charts with known birth times. I mean, Prince Harry, of anybody on the planet, I mean, we're going to have confidence about his birth time, right? I mean, this is the son of Princess Diana, hugely famous, and Prince Harry. And yeah, this is, the whole world was hovering around his birth. And so 4:20 p.m., we can certainly hang our hat on. But if we want to confirm it, we can look at other events. Okay, let's do that for a minute. Let's look at marriage. Let's look at marriage. the Navamsha chart. So we're going to look at the D9 for marriage. And we're also going to look at the natal chart. Well, Rahu Ketu. Rahu Ketu Jupiter was the dasha sequence. So Rahu is in the sign of Taurus, ruled by Venus. Venus is the karaka of marriage. It's karaka of the spouse for either sex, male or female. So Venus is the karaka of the seventh house. So that's confirmation alone. Rahu being disposited by Venus is a strong indication. Ketu, we're not seeing really any connection. It's disposited and conjunct with Mars. Not much confirmation there, other than that Mars aspects the seventh house, but that's from the 12th house. That could be a malefic aspect. That's a malefic aspect. So that's not going to give. This isn't a giver of marriage, Mars, certainly in his chart. But Jupiter is the sub-dasha lord, Rahu, Ketu, Jupiter. So Jupiter aspects the seventh house and the seventh lord. Is Jupiter a giver of marriage for Prince Harry? Absolutely. Jupiter's a giver in general, but especially aspecting the house in question, seventh house in this case, and seventh lord. So we're seeing some confirmation in the natal chart. And Mercury is the sub-dasha lord. That's the seventh lord. Okay, so now let's look at the Navamsha chart. Rahu is, wow, what can you tell me about that? That is, this is great. Rahu is aspected by the seventh lord, Jupiter. Rahu is also aspected by Venus, the seventh house karaka. So strong confirmation here. Even though it's not in the seventh house, it's in the sixth house. But it's aspected by two givers of marriage in the marriage chart, the divisional chart. And so is Ketu. Ketu is with Venus. And Jupiter is the seventh lord. So we can see, we can see confirmation of why Rahu, Ketu, Jupiter can give marriage. And this is what we expect. If the birth time's correct, you should be able to pull out any divisional chart and it becomes a precise tool. It's this tool of precision. And that's why Kapiel Raaj says that Vedic astrology is crude without the use of divisional charts. If you want precision, we need divisional charts. And it gives us greater confidence also as astrologers. And that's why working with birth time rectification becomes such a great way to become a better astrologer, because you are learning to see events in the retrospectively and in the divisional charts, which becomes a skill every astrologer needs to have. Okay, so now let's look at somebody who had a fairly accurate birth time. So this is a client that I had who asked me to find out his correct birth time within a 5-minute range. This is like easy peasy compared to most birth time issues. This is like not a big deal. This is only a 5-minute range. He's quite certain his birth time's within 5 minutes. It's also a 5 minutes that's not in the natal chart. That his ascendant is at 8 degrees. And so 5 minutes is not going to change his ascendant. So we know the ascendant is correct in the natal chart. Then we're looking at correcting the divisional charts, and that is the method for honing the birth time. At least that I recommend, and I recommend it only because Kapiel Raaj's method is all about using divisional charts and making sure that they're correct. And I'll just share early on when I met Kapiel Raaj, he I met him in Santa Fe. I was at David Frawley's house, and he said he was going to Houston to do readings, and he was invited by the Hindu Society in Houston. And I said, I want to go. My dad lives in Houston. So I went with him to Houston, and he asked me to be his assistant, help him enter in birth data, and if people are okay with that, I could sit in on the readings. And so I was like, oh, this is a great opportunity. So definitely I'm going to do this. And so he actually gave a reading to my dad, and so, but listening to him give readings was very interesting, because what he did was he asked people, did this happen? Did this happen? Did this happen? And with that, that's how he started the readings, confirming those events, that he could see those events, not only in the natal chart, but in the divisional charts. And I remember him asking my dad about events related to job. Did you get a job at this time? And he was correcting the birth time, looking at the dashamsha. And at one point he goes, okay, that's enough. We can use this. We can go ahead. And that was basically his method. So he was showing me by an example of how he does it. He does it right there in the reading. He doesn't collect information from people. He doesn't get events from the past. He predicts. He asks people, did this happen? And either they'll give confirmation, or they'll say no. And then that he uses as information to correct the divisional charts. So his method really was about correcting divisional charts. And so this is why I'm teaching this method, because this is what I've seen him do since 1993. And when I spent a month with him in 2000 in New Delhi, same thing. I came to his house every day, and people would come in. Of course, then he was talking to people in Hindi, and so I was not picking that up very much. So, but in any case, so just to let you know why I'm espousing this method, it's because it's his method, and it's what I've worked with for a long time, especially since I met him. Before I met him, I was only using the Navamsha, maybe the Dashamsha if I was lucky. Of course, Navamsha and Dashamsha are the two most important, because everybody asks about relationship and career, money or your honey. So in any case, so this gentleman, an engineer, very sharp intellect, he had begun learning astrology, and he was concerned that his Navamsha, his Dashamsha may be incorrect. And so he also was interested in the divisional charts, knowing that they're important for prediction. And so only the Dashamsha and the Navamsha are affected in that 5-minute change of birth time. So those are the only divisions we needed to work from. Even the D24 didn't change between, and the range of time was from 10:10 to 10:15. And so, I mean, we can go through all these events. You could see that this is all explainable if we wanted to take the time to do that. But let's jump to marriage. Marriage took place 2001 in Rahu Ketu Saturn Dasha. So again, Rahu Ketu, just like we saw in Prince Harry's chart, and actually was the case also in B.V. Raman's chart too. He had marriage happen in Rahu Ketu Dasha. So in the natal chart, Rahu is with Jupiter in Sagittarius and with the Sun. No connection with the 7th house, 7th Lord, or Venus. So this is a bit of a question mark. Also Ketu. Ketu is disposited by, ruled by Mercury. Mercury's with Venus. Venus is aspected by the seventh lord Saturn. So there's more of a clue with the subdasha. There's a good clue with the subdasha Ketu in the natal chart. And then the subdasha is Saturn. So Saturn is the seventh lord. It aspects the seventh house. It's aspected by Venus. It's in Venus's sign. So Saturn is certainly a giver for marriage. Okay, so we'll just put that in your back pocket. Now let's look at the Navamsha chart. Okay, so this Navamsha chart has Gemini ascendant with the 10-15 time. But check it out. And what happens if we change the time? We change the time back 1 minute. Now we're seeing that the Navamsha changes from Gemini to Taurus. Okay, so this is very interesting. Because now we're looking at Rahu Ketu, they're both on the first and seventh house axis. Can they be givers of marriage? Yes, so for sure, absolutely. It happened in Prince Harry's chart. You can go back and look at B.V. Raman's chart as well. But in any case, that's a strong clue. And Saturn doesn't need to be connected with the seventh house, seventh lord. It is the seventh lord in the natal chart. It already is a giver. So that trumps, oh God, I don't like using the name, using that phrase anymore, but in any case, Saturn rules and aspects the seventh house in the natal chart. It certainly will bring marriage in its dasha, or can bring marriage in its dasha, even a pratyantara dasha. Okay, so so then we have some strong evidence that his ascendant in the Navamsha is actually Taurus. And then the birth time changes to within 10 o'clock and 10 seconds until 22, 10, 14, and 23 seconds. So now we're more precise. But he also asked about his 10th house. So we got a job. Let's look at that. We got a job. So now we're going to look quickly at the Dashamsha, the D10 chart. So the Dashamsha, the range of the Dashamsha is between, of the ascendant of Libra in the Dashamsha is between 10, 11, and 32 seconds, and 10, 24, and 20 seconds. So he was concerned that he could have been born between 10:10 and 10:15, sometime in there. Well, this is interesting because he got his first job in Rahu Mahadasha. Rahu's in the 10th house with exalted Jupiter, aspected by Sun, Karaka of the 10th house. Jupiter also is a Karaka of the 10th house. So Rahu in the 10th house certainly can give career prominence, and that's exactly what happened in his life. His profession skyrocketed with that first job after he got his master's degree in civil engineering. He got his first job, and that took off. His career took off. So Rahu in the 10th house can certainly represent that. And not only that, but the subdasha is Saturn. Saturn's also a Karaka of the 10th house. It's in the 11th house, a house related to organizations, affiliations. It's in a fixed sign. people can become fixed to an institution in a dasha of a planet in the 11th house, in a fixed sign, especially Saturn. Can certainly we can justify that event. Getting a job within an organization. Jupiter is the sub-dasha lord. Jupiter again in the 10th house. Gajikeswara yoga, exalted. Certainly, these are strong clues. So eventually, I refined his birth time till 10:13. I won't go through all of those reasons why. But this gives you some idea of how to correct your birth time. If you're interested in correcting your own birth time, if you have clients and want to help them find their birth time with this introduction to birth time rectification, you have some beginning tools. And we're going to go into this in much greater depth in this webinar this weekend. And I go in and even more depth in the book, which will be available in, I don't know, something like a month. In any case, it's been fun to share some little examples with you and giving some justification for why we use divisional charts to correct the birth time or refine, fine-tune. You know, people are interested in precision. You know, people expect precision. Clients expect precision. Vedic astrology is known to be a very precise predictive tool. People want access to that, but they give us a rounded birth time. So they want us, they expect and want us to be precise, but then they give a kind of sort of accurate birth time. But they don't want a kind of sort of accurate reading. You know, they're not something they're paying for, or that's not what they're taking time to get a reading for. No, they're interested in precision. And we can't expect the client to know how a minute or 2 minutes, 5 minutes here or there is going to make a big difference. I mean, without the correct divisional charts, I can't, and astrologers can't have so much confidence unless they're relying on intuition, perhaps, or they're looking deeper into the natal chart without looking at divisional charts, perhaps through nakshatras, etc. In any case, divisional charts are a great tool. Why not have access to the whole range of the Jyotish toolbox? I mean, why not? And Jaimini also is a very important tool in the Jaimini, in the Jyotish toolbox. And this is also important for birth time rectification, especially when we're looking at two ascendants. We have to decide between two ascendants. Jaimini is useless for if your birth time is already known within one ascendant, because at 0 degrees or 29 degrees, the Jaimini Chara Dasha at least is exactly the same. So that's good for birth time rectification, because then it gives us two Dasha sequences to look at two different ascendants from. So then it becomes a very useful predictive tool and helps to a great extent if you're looking at a 24-hour birth time rectification. In other words, we're looking at all 12 ascendants, then Jaimini is essential. Of course, Jaimini plus Vimshotri Dasha, those two, they're a 1-2 punch. They're definitely great to have working in collaboration with one another. So that's a little bit for today. Hope it's been fun. Hope you learned some things. And if you want to learn more, check out the webinar this weekend and use the coupon code KRSchannel, all caps, and get 10% discount. lightonvedicastrology.com, and thanks so much. See you next time. Namaste.